So in the last episode, we saw how this model by Dennis Lamaro essentially shows that the Sun is only 800 meters across and only 90 kilometers away from the Earth. We also put the amount of energy released by the Sun into context and explained how it is impractical to expect that much energy to be released by an object with such a small size. Now we continue our analysis of this childish model of the universe by taking a closer look at the firmament itself. For the purposes of calculation, it appears that this firmament is around 2 kilometers thick. The only mystery is what it's made of. Whether it's steel or stone, it doesn't really matter, and I'll show you why in a moment. I'd like to examine the water above the firmament to begin with and move on from there. Given that the water is above the firmament, I'm going to assume said barrier is made of a solid material. I'm also going to assume that atmospheric pressure and gravity are the same above the firmament as they are at sea level here on Earth. On the right side of this model, we can see that the deepest observable part of the water above the firmament is around 50 kilometers. I'm going to calculate the pressure at 50 kilometers below the above dome water surface. The formula for determining pressure at certain depths is the value of 1 atmosphere added to the multiplication of the density of salt water, the force of gravity, and the depth in meters. After crunching the numbers, we find that the pressure of the water against the firmament at this location is over 500 million pascals of pressure. That's around the same amount as a water jet cutter, which can cut through steel with ease. Water of such a high pressure would erode away whatever the firmament is made of very quickly indeed, and drown every living thing on the planet. That is, if it managed to avoid hitting the Sun or the other stars as it streamed through. Not to mention, the stars would just turn that water into steam in a fraction of a second, so don't even try to argue that rain comes from the water leaking through the firmament. Speaking of the Sun, how has it not melted or heated the firmament to the point where it was boiling all the water in the first place? It's only 10 kilometers away from the firmament, and keeping in mind that the Sun releases enough energy every year to match 3 quintillion megatons of TNT, it's really remarkable how anyone can believe that this firmament actually exists. We can see that the Sun's orbit is inside the firmament, and appears to sink into the water surrounding the Earth. So let's calculate the temperature increase of the water once the Sun is close enough to the water to affect it significantly. Well, the amount of energy released from the Sun every second is around 38 octillion joules. Heat capacity is the amount of energy required to heat an object by 1 degree Kelvin. The heat capacity of water is over 4,000 joules per kilogram. There is around 1.3 sextillion kilograms of water on Earth, which is the same amount in liters. The amount of energy required to heat that amount of water by 1 degree Celsius is around 5.5 septillion joules. So if you were to immerse the Sun in the water surrounding the Earth for only 1 second, it would heat all the water on Earth to over 7,000 degrees Celsius. In comparison, lava is only around 1,000 degrees Celsius. This is the thing about creationism. Its adherents have no real knowledge of the universe they currently live in, yet they are perfectly happy to make up models like this one, seemingly unaware that to people of sound mind, these models are utterly inconsistent with reality. Creationists come up with ignorant and scientifically inaccurate statements about the Earth being flat, or less than 10,000 years old, or surrounded by a giant dome, or created by their personal sky fairy, just for their special snowflake selves. The reason creationism annoys me, and the reason it's one of the most idiotic and dangerous belief systems around, is because there are plenty of people who are old enough to reproduce, to vote, to drive, to access all the knowledge in the world through the internet at pretty much any time, and yet they elect instead to complain about everything science has granted them. Everything from their longer lifespans to their articulation to the technology they use to express their ignorance, all of it was granted to them by scientists who never let society beat the curiosity out of them, by people who worked for years on their degrees just to keep these ungrateful snobs fed, healthy, happy, and prosperous. The only reason televangelists, creationists, pseudoscientists, and intellectually barren politicians still complain about science and speculate on mass scientific conspiracies is because they hate being dependent on something they don't understand. So instead of staying quiet when you hear creationists or other religious people trying to push their beliefs on others, do what you should and call them on their bullshit. There's a myth permeating society that says you should respect everyone's beliefs just because they have them and consider them to be important. But how intensely a person believes has no bearing at all on how valid the beliefs are. You could believe with every fibre of your being that 2 plus 2 equals 7, and you would be wrong every single time, and it would not be remiss of anyone else to say that you are wrong. Science requires us to look at the world objectively, not in an emotionless manner, but merely with the purpose of distinguishing what we want to be reality with what it actually is. And more than that, we must be willing to fight against deeply held religious conviction when they threaten to drag humanity back into the intellectual dark ages.